The Seattle Kraken now with 2 vacancies on their coaching staff.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Seattle hockey fans, welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, also a contributor to CBS Sports. Thank you for joining us and making us your first listen every single day. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about coaching changes. We got an update there last week. Also, our head coach, we do have a head coach, talked to season ticket holders, what was said there, what were some of the takeaways from the season ticket holders, and we'll close out the show. Hearing once again from our game night crew as the Florida Panthers are inching closer and closer to another Stanley Cup. What do they need to do to close it out this week? We'll, again, hear from Shukri and Eddie, as well as Armando Velez on that matter. Let's stick, though, with Seattle. Bob Wood's out. We heard the news last week, quote, as Lane Lambert continues to evaluate the coaching staff, we've made the decision to relieve Bob Woods of his duties. We appreciate all of Bob's hard work and dedication to the Kraken and wish him luck going forward. So, another assistant coach is out. That is also coming on the heels of the news that Steve Briere would be out. Briere was brought in by Dave Haxtell. Bob Woods, just the one season under Dan Bylsma. We continue to hear that Jessica Campbell will remain with the Seattle Kraken, though at last I've reported, talked to Jessica in May. We don't exactly know what that role will look like, but it sounds like potentially that will be in this development space. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about goaltending in the next segment and potentially goaltending, what the Kraken are looking for with regard to the goaltending coach. But seeing as there are some vacancies, want to let you know that someone from the Colorado Eagles coaching staff has popped up potentially in some conversations to move into a role with the Seattle Kraken, and that is Aaron Schneekloth. He is the head coach for the Colorado Eagles. They are an affiliate of the Colorado Avalanche at the AHL level. He had spent 10 years prior to his 2 head coaching seasons with the Eagles on the Eagles coaching staff, which included championships with the Eagles when they were Colorado's ECHL affiliate. So he's been with the Colorado Eagles organization when they were in the ECHL and when they moved up to the AHL. Led the Eagles to back-to-back Kelly Cup titles in 2016-17 and 17-18, a 95, 38, and 11, 698 win percentage, combined regular season record, followed by a 32-12 playoff mark. He's from Calgary, Alberta, runner-up for ECHL Coach of the Year in both of his championship campaigns. In his first season as AHL head coach, he led them to a 40-25, 5-2 record, 40 wins, tied for most in a single season since the Eagles made the jump to the AHL. So basically what I'm saying here is that he's got experience with young talent. 19 consecutive seasons with the Eagles, including his final 7 years as a player. So he knows that organization very well, and this would be a move, obviously, away from the Eagles and their affiliate. What you like here, if you are thinking about the Kraken roster and what we're expecting to see, is that if you get someone with Schneekloth's experience, his ability to be a winner at the developmental level, that bodes well for that continued pipeline that I always talk about on Locked On Kraken, my everydayers, my OGers. I talk about that a lot with Tad O'Had when he's in town, or when I can catch him on the phone. He's our head coach and general manager for the ECHL Kansas City Mavericks, who had a nice run in the playoffs, didn't quite get where they wanted this year, but we'll see what next year brings. So that's promising. Perhaps, someone that can work alongside Jessica Campbell, because again, as I said in the episode on why Jessica Campbell should not be head coach, I think it is all because there's a lot more learning that she can and should do. And that's not a knock on her potential. It's just a part of the process. And I think it's important that when she does get a head coaching opportunity at whatever level that may be, that she really is able to do so with a lot of sharp tools in her toolbox, so to speak. So this might be something that both helps with Campbell, but it instantaneously, in a lot of ways, would likely help with that pipeline from the ECHL to the AHL and, of course, the NHL, which is something that the Kraken have worked on. All right, coming up, let's hear what Lambert said to season ticket holders. Oops, found a typo. We're rocking with it. Apologies for anyone watching on YouTube. There's definitely a typo there. Double type is more like it. But Lane Lambert spoke to season ticket holders. I wonder if some of you were there. If so, let me know in the comments on YouTube. But had some takeaways, including maybe we will get, whether it is Schneekloth or someone else, an announcement of an assistant coach pretty soon. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Have you ever looked at your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? You know what? That used to be me until I started using Monarch Money. And that is because Monarch Money helps you find all of the dining out, online shopping, and entertainment expenses that are so easy to lose track of. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app that you might see out here. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I love looking at the cash flow dashboard. It is a very clear and easy way for me to identify and understand where my business is at. Because yes, I use Monarch Money for my business account. So take control over your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken your first listen of the day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. A reminder, you can follow us now on TikTok at Locked On Kraken, and I highly recommend that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. For those who are watching on YouTube, thank you. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you always know what is new in Locked On Kraken land. Okay, let's talk about Lane Lambert talking to season ticket holders. We had an article by Jeff Baker recapping an event that happened last week. Lane Lambert's crucial first step with Kraken fans. In front of a somewhat skeptical audience of Kraken supporters, the new head coach leaves a solid impression after fielding questions about his approach and the team's immediate future. And so, this was a brunch where season tickets were invited to 32 Bar and Grill last week, Wednesday, and Lambert made his first appearance for local fans alongside general manager Jason Botterill and Todd Leiweke. And in his article, Jeff Baker has quotes from different season ticket holders, including Tessa Gibson. When I spoke to him about what was going to be different about this season's locker room, he said he wanted it to feel like it's home. Talking to Lane Lambert, that is. The players step into the building and they're excited to come and play. So I'm hoping that's something he can deliver on, and that's something that he means. Jeff goes on to say that Tessa is going to reserve judgment until Lambert puts an actual team on the ice. But as for now, with all others attending the event, appreciated the opportunity to meet Lambert close up and get his straightforward take. He was also, he also communicated about putting everyone in a role to succeed. It's something that I've talked about in his different appearances. Are you predictable to your teammates? Accountability factor on the ice, a trust level. It takes a bit to build. It takes a bit to grow. There's no question about that. But that's the philosophy for me. So let's break this down, because I've been talking about this approach. To me, it sounds like there is at least some semblance of security that Lane Lambert has, that he is going to be given the time to, quote, take a little bit to build and take a little bit to grow. Now, on the one hand, I think that's great. It just seems so counter to the abrupt moves and changes that the organization has been making. But again, perhaps like Tessa, I need to reserve judgment because I don't know Lane Lambert very well. We know that he's had a short stint as head coach, and I don't want to see the Seattle Kraken hiring another head coach. I'm still not quite sure what to make of the fact that we let Dan Bylsma go after just one season, when in reality, nothing, or I should say, nothing has really been explicitly said about what wasn't working. I just get the sense that it's something that was pretty sour. The abrupt move on, the kind of short answers as to why the change was made. It just seems like there was something that was the line in the sand, and that's why they moved on. Now, are there any guarantees that Lane Lambert was given? I don't know. But this is definitely spoken like a man that understands that this team needs time. And perhaps if that's not coming from him, then it's coming from the front office, the organization, and that he's been instructed that there is time here to build. If it is coming from him, my assumption would be that he's speaking to the front office and the ownership group and saying, this is what I see. This is how I want to operate. And hopefully there was a conversation on what that timeline will look like. I can't say if Dan Bylsma had those conversations one way or another. I can't imagine that they assumed that they were going to hire him and get rid of him after just one season. Again, that's what makes me think something soured here. There was something that had to be nipped. And there's been conversations, even in Lane and how he's approached things about, if there's something that's going on, we have to address it. So maybe we'll get some insight. I really hope it wasn't anything too devious. Sometimes personalities clash. I'm a pretty strong personality, and I completely understand that. Now, how things are done and how people leave and the way that they communicate, some people do it the right way and some people absolutely do not, even though they think they are, which is always so baffling to me. But anyway, this is an organization that needs to steady the ship, but I don't think they can afford to completely take their foot off the gas. And sometimes those things feel counter. Sometimes you have to slow down to then speed ahead. It's like when you're taking a turn, if you want to take a tight turn, you don't accelerate into the turn. You have to take your foot off of the gas. Now, you don't want to brake because then you lose momentum. And it's about that drag, right? That's one of my favorite things to do when I drive, is like get the right sweet spot of being able to hit a corner really tight without losing momentum. And not everyone can do that. I'm just saying. I learned how to drive in New York. We're a little, we got to get in, get out. So anyway, I'm curious to see. Okay, other things. He's thinking about the philosophy about playing aggressive, playing on your toes. I like that a lot. So here's what stood out to me, and a conversation I think it's worth having. This is Dennis, Toronto native, who is now offering support to the Seattle Kraken. I'm a hockey fan, and though I like to see Seattle win, I go to watch hockey. I don't mind if they're losing if they play well, but I'm not sure whether the Seattle fan base on its own is really willing to support a team that underperforms. I want to emphasize that term, underperforms. Let me read that part again. I'm not sure whether the Seattle fan base on its own is really willing to support a team that underperforms and doesn't get better, especially because we have baseball and football to go watch, not to mention WNBA, NWSL, and maybe the MNBA as well. I, of course, added those last things. Underperforms and doesn't get better. Let me ask you, dear gentle reader. Okay. Yes, I'm a Bridgerton fan. Dear gentle listener, are you willing to watch a team that underperforms? Are you willing to watch a team that doesn't get better? Because I can tell you, as your host of Locked On Kraken, where we go with a show Monday through Friday in season and most of the off season, I'm not looking forward to having to talk about a team that, quote, underperforms and doesn't get better, because that's what I've been doing for 3 out of the last 4 seasons. That's what we've been watching for going on or going into season 5. And with, again, as I've told you, my OGers, my everydayers, my true since the A1 day one days, you know, I told you when we made that playoff in the playoffs in season 2, my fear, which I think is now has been substantiated, is that we arrived not only earlier than expected, but that it would throw a monkey wrench into that 5-year plan that we kept hearing about. Are you too cautious? Do you stay too close to the plan and you miss a window to arrive earlier than expected and be that perennial playoff team? Or do you overcorrect? You're overcorrecting, Marge. Is that Dirty Dancing? You're overcorrecting, Marge. Yeah, that's a Law and Order guy, right? What's his name? Orbach, Jerry Orbach. He was the candlestick in Beauty and the Beast. Also, did not know that he had such a lucrative, I guess, kind of theater career, because, I mean, I was a child when in the 90s. Anyway, completely, I'm good for at least one random rant or tangent. Not really a rant, more of a tangent today. I still have time for a rant. Anyway, you're overcorrecting, Marge. We overcorrected, perhaps. Or did we not correct enough? It's one of the two, maybe both, which is a little scary because I'm not sure how you do that. That's my thing. So underperforming and not getting better, I'm not willing to talk about that. Are you willing to watch that? It's one thing if the team is progressively getting better and you just lose games. That to me is probably season 1. Season 1 and post-trade deadline or in the last 20 games of last season. But I'm not willing to see a team underperform. That's just no. First of all, can we talk about it? If you are underperforming after the last 2 seasons, we are basement level in the NHL. If we underperform from if the expectation is to at least be as good or as bad, I don't know, as we were last season, to underperform from that is basement. Basement in the Pacific Division for sure, which I've already talked about, is likely for us. But that's also basement when it comes to the NHL. But, I've debated with y'all most of this past season. Some people want to be team tank. I don't believe in that. So no, I don't want a team that's going to underperform, and I don't want a team that's not actively getting better. That's unacceptable to me. So I hear where Harlock is coming from here, and underperforming and not getting better are not options. Now, Is it a 1% increase? Is 5%? It has to be more than 0. And even that is like a really low standard. We cannot regress again for the third season in a row. Cannot happen. So no, I'm not here for underperforming. I'm not here for not getting better. But, there's the business aspect of it. There's a lot of investment in the Seattle Kraken. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but an interesting conversation about the business aspect of it, things of that nature. The Seattle Kraken are definitely investing. Kraken Hockey Network, with lowering season ticket holder prices, there's a lot of ways that the Seattle Kraken continue to invest. And those things we will continue to cover because those are the great things to talk about. Those are the things that I think this organization, for the most part, has done right. There have been some, ways that different organizations or individuals have been treated that, maybe left a sour taste in the mouth of some fans. We've talked about that a few times on the show. Those things are going to happen. But the investment seems to be there, and that's fine and dandy. Do I need them to be the perennial playoff team starting next season? I don't think they're going to be. I need to see increase, though. And a single, percentage point increase, is that enough? I don't know. But something has to get better. Absolutely. Before we move on and we talk a little bit about what's going on in the Stanley Cup final, Botterill, in particular, mentioned goaltending, or at least per this article. Goaltending was mentioned by the fans as a concern and addressed by Jason Botterill, who said that they will soon name a new goaltending coach who is, quote, familiar with both Joey Daccord and Philip Grubauer. Botterill added that new coach Lambert also, quote, had success with Gruby back in the Washington days from their time with the Capitals earlier in Grubauer's career. So specifically talking about Philip Grubauer here, who, again, I just thought writing was on the wall. The guy is gone. And maybe he is the sour thing. I could see it potentially. Is he the grain of sand that was just too much? Philip Grubauer and what was happening potentially with Dan Bylsma? I don't know. But I've said before, there was a disconnect with how the organization, I think, felt about some players. Philip Grubauer, perhaps, definitely Daniel Sprong, but that's neither here nor there. Botterill said, we understand it's a key area, talking about goaltending. We're going to be expecting and challenging our group, certainly, to improve in that area. Also mentioned was the 0-12 record in back-to-back games. That's just the record from this season. I think it's more if we go back to the last 2 seasons. There's a need for a mentality about attention to detail. Yeah, no crap. Understatement. Attention to detail was the pits. We've got to see a marketable increase in that area. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And I'm glad that they had this event for season ticket holders. Let me know, were you able to go? What were your thoughts? We'll talk about that as we continue on this week on Locked On Kraken. But for the remainder of today's episode, let's take you to Locked On NHL Game Night with Shukri and Eddie. We're going to hear them break down what was a thrilling performance from none other than Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett, 2 players that I've talked about when it came to free agent targets. And a lot of you had a lot of comments that I think we absolutely have to talk about. That is coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Age ain't nothing but a number. The late, great Aaliyah once sang that. Problematic, perhaps, given some of her relationships with other people at that time, but I'm going to put that on the shelf. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, look it up. I talked about some free agents, and one of the biggest comments that I got about the free agents was about age. The second one was about money, which completely makes sense, and not maybe wanting to spend too much money. It's very interesting. It still is so mind-boggling to me, as I think a lot of you know, someone who came from covering women's sports, not to mention I've been a female my entire life. So this notion that at 28 you are washed is so foreign to me as a woman. 28 and you are maybe beyond your prime? Now, in fairness, hockey's a very physical sport. The development trajectory, etc. But just generally speaking, I feel like men are a little bit more, they lean into the ageism of it all, even when they talk about women, which whole different conversation for a very different podcast. 28-year-old, 32, 33-year-old being old is so wild to me. Once you get to the mid-30s, I think, in sports, but there's a lot of different factors, including how do you take care of your body? What is your mental game? That's huge. And there are some on the wrong side or close to the wrong side of 30 players that are lighting it up when it comes to the Stanley Cup final, but don't take my word for it, because, maybe I'm just seeing this from a woman's perspective. Also, I'm going to leave that one there. I feel like I've made that joke before. Anyway, let's see what the guys had to say, particularly about Brad Marchand putting on a show in this Stanley Cup final.
This one, the Florida Panthers with a huge 5-2 win in game number 5. Let's not waste any time. Let's get a report from our friend, the host of Locked On Florida Panthers, Armando Velez.
Don't let the scoreboard fool you. That was a defensive clinic by the Florida Panthers. What is up, guys? Armando Velez here from the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, here to quickly break down the Panthers' 5-2 win over the Edmonton Oilers in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. And the Panthers took control of this game with 11 minutes left in the first period as Brad Marchand scored on a breakaway. They did not allow a shot on goal for the rest of the period. Sam Bennett added on to the Panthers' lead. The Panthers were able to get in on their game as the second period was a very quiet period from both teams. And although the Panthers extended their lead, the Edmonton Oilers kept fighting a little bit, but the Panthers hung on and are now one win away from lifting the Stanley Cup for the second straight season. We're going to break down all this and more on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Your team every day.
All right, thanks to Armando Velez, who's done a great job all season and postseason long with reports on the Florida Panthers. So the big question we were talking about in our previous show, would the Panthers be able to bounce back from blowing that 3-goal lead in Game 4? You and I both believed that they were more than capable of coming back. I didn't think they would have any hangover from that loss, as disappointing as it was. Certainly they proved it. They showed the veteran team that they are. They completely turned the page and get a huge road win. And it started off with a strong first period, and now that's 10 road wins this postseason for the Florida Panthers, which ties the NHL record. So they are not afraid of going into hostile territory and getting a big win if necessary. They certainly proved that in Game 5.
When your team goes to a sauna, or should I say a steam room, as an entire group, just to release some steam, no pun intended, that tells me you're going to be okay. You tell me you're fine. All right, we lost. We're just going to go in the steam room, have a conversation. Nothing to see there, no big deal. And in fact, they were talking about it during the pregame. And I was like, if you're Edmonton, you should be worried. Because if you're that relaxed coming off a bad loss, as the Florida Panthers were, and the Oilers are back home, they're confident, that in itself should tell you Florida is not coming into Edmonton to mess around. And that first goal by Brad Marchand was the kind of goal that just makes you like, oh my God, he just undressed two defensemen. He made them look like fools on the ice. He made them look bad. And I'm like, oh my God, Mama Hick, there goes that man again. There goes that man. Brad Marchand, the same man who apparently he was so banged up. He was so hurt, coming back from multiple injuries, no less. He was pretty much a shell of himself with the Bruins. And now he looks like he's a second coming of Mario Lemieux in these playoffs. If you know, you know. If you understand it, you understand that. So the first goal was just like an absolute beauty, but then to see it again, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And what's even more incredible about Brad Marchand is this. The thing that I find to be even more amazing is the fact that out of Marchand's 10 goals in these playoffs, 6 of the goals have come in these Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, there was a graphic that I saw in which that Brad Marchand's record in games in which that he has scored in his career in the Stanley Cup Finals, he's only lost exactly just one game, just once. And that goes to show you, not just only in terms of the dominance, but in terms of the effectiveness when he elevates his game to that next level and on the highest stage there is in the NHL. And for me, when you talk about Brad Marchand, and obviously he's been hated on for years and so forth, he's been criticized fairly or not, but what you've seen during these playoffs, especially in the Stanley Cup Finals this year, has got to have left you thinking, and not only thinking but feeling he is unquestionably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That in itself was actually answered tonight with this performance. And no matter what happens in the rest of the rest of the series, whether if it ends in Game 6 or if it goes to a Game 7, but Brad Marchand and what he just accomplished tonight was nothing less than absolutely legendary stuff. We're talking about names that we haven't heard from since the legendary 1970s Montreal Canadiens teams. That says something.
Yeah, Brad Marchand has been a huge acquisition for the Florida Panthers, no question about it. And he was pretty quiet, and I mentioned it after we recapped Game 4. Yeah. He was the one player for me that really had a lot of jump tonight. I mean, it was obvious that he had legs, and it seemed like a lot of other players didn't. And it was a quick turnaround and pretty surprising. You mentioned 37 years old. He's not a spring chicken anymore. But he from the opening faceoff, he was flying around, and you're like, wow, Marchand is coming with it tonight. And that was before he even scored any goals. So he certainly, again, had the jump. And I talked about the depth of the Florida Panthers, that over a 7-game series or maybe a 6-game series at this point, that it would show itself. And I thought it did in this game. The third line for Florida has been huge for them all postseason, huge in this game. Marchand had 2 goals. Eetu Listerainen capped it with the empty netter. Anton Lundell had an assist as well. 5-point night from the third line for the Florida Panthers. So I thought the depth from them did show itself in this crucial game. I mentioned it earlier. The penalty kill I thought was huge for the Panthers. And even though statistically Florida's power play has actually been better than Edmonton's, right? When you have 4 guys on the ice defending and McDavid and Draisaitl out there, it's hard not to feel like that's a very dangerous situation for you to be in. But I thought the penalty kill for the Panthers came up absolutely huge in this one tonight. They didn't let the Oilers get back into it in the second period when they had those huge 2 power play opportunities.
One of the things I was looking forward to watching in regards to the Florida Panthers was the penalty kill and how they would play defensively. And it was just absolutely perfect. You cannot find a single flaw. I mean, if there are people that are going to be out there, they're going to say, well, I mean, the Oilers scored 2 goals. Outside of you can't find fault with the way that the Panthers played defensively, but especially with the penalty kill, which at times in game number 4 was under siege against Edmonton. And I thought that, in my opinion, that if they were going to get right in this series or in this game, the penalty kill was going to have to step up, which it did. Defensively, that they were going to have to get a lot better. But also the goaltending, the performance of Bobrovsky And I got to give him his flowers, because as much as we talk about the defensive play of the Florida Panthers, and I give you credit, Eddie, on your point about the depth that the Panthers have, especially with the third line and fourth line tonight. Oh my God. With that, you also have to include that Sergei Bobrovsky has been huge. He made big saves when he needed to make those key important saves in moments in this game. But I also think that you got to give credit to Paul Maurice. He had those guys ready. And you talk about the legs being ready to roll. Just last point real quick. I thought the energy from both teams early on was excellent. I thought, considering that prior to tonight, they had played maybe, 1 or 2 games within the last 5 days or so, give or take. The energy level was excellent. The legs of the Panthers, they were just moving. They kept their feet moving. And it showed, especially on the scoring plays. And lastly, in conclusion, I think that is something that the Florida Panthers are going to certainly benefit from, especially with another 2 days off coming up ahead with the next game, Game 6, potential clincher on Tuesday night.
Yeah, we thought the Panthers had the edge in net going into the series. Certainly that has shown itself at this point. Bobrovsky allowed 2 goals on 21 shots, but some key saves. Didn't see a ton of shots overall, especially in the first period, but did make some key saves down the stretch. And now the Oilers have questions. Who will they start in net in Game 6 as they're now pushed to the brink? We will talk about that next here on Locked On NHL.
Once again, our Locked On NHL game night crew doing a fantastic job. Shout out to Armando, Velez. We've squad casted a time or 2. Cat's in a good position, and my colleagues at the CBS Sports HQ Fort Lauderdale studio, I'm sure, are very excited about that. But again, wrong side of 30, I don't know. I just don't understand that as as someone who, again, has no experience being a man. That must be tough. Peaking so early in life, man. That's tough. I feel like I'm just getting started. Let's go. Lane Lambert, though, also making his rounds in Seattle sports. He was there for an epic win. The Seattle Storm got a really great win the other night, handing the Minnesota Lynx their first loss of the season. Unfortunately, the Valkyries caught them sleeping a little, not in Seattle, but in NorCal, in Northern California. And they weren't able to keep the win streak alive. But it was great to see Lane Lambert and his family at Climate Pledge Arena supporting the Seattle Storm. What kind of support is this fan base, though, going to give Lane Lambert and the vision of this organization now with the changes? Hey, we've got all off season to talk about that. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Kraken your first listen of the day, your daily destination. Maybe you, like the Florida Panthers, just went to the hot box, the sauna, sweated out a little, listened to some Locked On Kraken. Either way, a reminder to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and let's hold fast. Let's stay true. And we say loud and proud, let's go Kraken. I will catch you on the next episode. Erica L. Ayala signing out.